I'm first going to start with a disclaimer, which is this is a little bit of a different kind of webinar. So it's data storytelling with Power BI and an exercise in information leadership. That's the fancy title I came up with. And so we're going to tackle those topics, but a little bit differently than probably most technical webinars. So this is, we hear all the time, I think, in our field, people, process, technology. So I'm going to talk a lot about people today. I'm going to talk about you and me and us and, the things that are on our table. So just to kind of give a recap of the poll questions before we start. 24, this is really interesting that about 50% of you guys either have been just started, so about 24% were 0 to 3 months with Power BI, and then I saw about 24% were 2+ years. So we really have about 50% of our audience, well on the end caps here of new to a little bit more experience. So I think it hopefully will touch base for everybody and be relevant. I have given past webinars and they primarily cover data storytelling with Power BI, data flows, that kind of thing. And so they were maybe a little more technical in the weeds and with demos. This is going to be a little different. I have a quiz in here. Hopefully, I want this to be interactive. So more like a YouTube, this is millennial of me, more like a, like a YouTube kind of live stream experience where people get to comment. Like I really am curious about your experience with leadership in particular, and so that's kind of how we're really going to look at everything. If our story today is about Power BI and our roles and what we can do with the business and how we can be effective in our roles, then leadership is basically like the paper that's written on. So that is the bread and butter of today's conversation. So without further ado, here's a formal introduction. My name is Erin Ostrowski. I am a BI consultant and a trainer in a past life. I still work with the training team. We're working on a book right now, but I am now dedicated to working with clients and on projects. So it's been really fun to work with these technologies from a variety of perspectives, both in big groups, small groups, and then obviously in an ongoing sort of committed fashion to drive the results. I really enjoy my work. A little bit about me. I am a writer, creator type. I love technology because it's like my tool, but I would definitely say I'm a little bit on the artsy side. I'm a people person. So in a past life, I was a business journalist. My degree is in communication, PR. So I bring a lot of that with me, and I think sometimes it makes me a little bit of an oddball in the tech field, but hey, you're here for a webinar and we're gonna talk about this, right? We're gonna bring some of that, hopefully that background to play and drive some value for all of us. So my contact information is on the screen. Connect with me on LinkedIn, send me an email if you want. I love to connect with people, so it would be a pleasure to chat with you.
Hey, Erin, really quickly, I hate to cut in. Your screen is on the presenter view. Some people are saying, instead of like the huge PowerPoint screen.
So, girl, thanks for letting me know. This is why you have people. But it doesn't seem to. So when I go into that, this is what happens. Let's see if I do it again. Maybe it'll. Oh, you know why? Because I have two screens. Hold on. And
you're just sharing the wrong screen. That's it.
Girl, that's exactly what's happening. Hey, this is to have you as a friend and have my back. The only thing is I don't know exactly how to bring it back over because I can't seem to grab it. Dang, nabbit.
So if you go to, do you see it?
Let me try it.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. But see, you can't see it. It is switching the screen.
So go to show screen. Oh.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's
okay,
better.
I just swapped the screen there. Thank you, Crystal. You rock. You rock. Sorry, everybody. It's okay. Just keep driving forward, right?
You're on the, okay.
So,
you're
good. That makes sense?
Yep, you're good.
Back on the page. All right. So anyways, like I was saying, connect with me. I'm very human, as you can tell. I make mistakes and just keep rolling. So today, like I said, it's going to be a little bit different. I have a quiz embedded. We're going to do a poll question. I really want to dig into leadership and leadership styles. So I was happy that 68% of you identified as a leader in your workplace. One thing I will say is that if you are using this tool and you are showing up to work and you're using Power BI, 100% of you have the ability to exercise leadership. So like, we're going to dig into that. We're going to probably start a little bit at a high level and then dive into information leadership, do our little quiz and interaction. I'm going to poll you and find out what your style is. And then we're going to talk about practical application. And then I'm going to wrap that into Power BI data storytelling. If throughout this you are interested in some of the specific, data storytelling tactics in depth, I have already done webinars. You can go to Pragmatic Works YouTube channel and you can find those. There's a couple of them. There's also some on data flows. So I would encourage you to do that if you're interested in more. This is definitely a bit more conceptual. So leadership is one of those funny topics, right? It can be dry as a bone and it can be incredibly interesting. It can also be painful to be under terrible leaders, and it can be amazing to be on a great team and feel like you're driving towards something that's meaningful. One thing that I want to emphasize about leadership is that I'm really focusing on the mission, right? Leadership in the context of having a mission. So for us at work, it's like, what are we hoping to accomplish, both in our work streams, in our areas of responsibility and accountability, but also big picture, what is your company driving towards? And then that ties into values and vision. And so I want to make the point that for information leadership in particular, I'm talking about using data to drive that forward. So the vision, the mission, values, all of these sort of big picture items that can feel so high and lofty. No, we're bringing them down to earth, and we're saying that as people who have our hands on the data and we get to help share the story, we are in a great position to be leaders. Whether we have a formal title or not, that is not the point. Leadership is more primarily, in my perspective, about your influence, your ability to influence people wherever you may be positioned, regardless of your status or your title. So I have seen incredible leadership exhibited by people who had, executive administration as their title. People who have been assistants have demonstrated leadership. I've seen them just absolutely, drive forward and bring their talents to the table and communicate with people. And it's funny, they talk about, managing up. Well, that's an aspect of influence and of leadership, right? In a lot of ways, leadership is a mentality. And so the kind of the spheres we're going to talk about are that leadership in terms of being an information leader is really has to do with you being knowledgeable about your information resources. So being knowledgeable about Power BI, being knowledgeable about the Azure platform or whatever your data sources are, being knowledgeable about the social processes, right? So what's the hierarchy in your company and the organization? Who do you know within your company in various departments, and how can you bring that together to both using sort of those soft skills, that soft knowledge of, okay, well, I know Jan in HR, she's been doing this for 20 years, and if I need somebody to talk to get a little bit deeper insight about a particular person, she's confidential, I can talk to her. So there's social knowledge in sort of a soft sense, but then there's also social knowledge, in the sense of, hey, I know that my boss really values XYZ, and so I'm going to do what I can to get on board, and I'm going to drive towards that because I know his or her, values and what is important to them. The other thing is, of course, within report telling, we are driving information in front of people and we are putting it in front of their face. And so we are very much at the helm of organizational learning. So that's kind of a two-way process. If you're building reports, yes, you could just be told exactly what to do. That's fine, but hopefully, it's an engaging process, and you're asking questions and you're learning. And sometimes we show up to places or we show up on a project and it's like a blank slate. It's like you really have to start from scratch, doing that organizational learning, going, okay, what's the business? What do you need to know? What's important to you? And as you start to you know, you understand the technology side of the house and you understand your craft, and then you understand the business and you know what questions they want to answer, you are being a bridge builder, and I guarantee you are in a spot of leadership to do that. So like I said in that little slide thing at the bottom, hashtag influence, hashtag dynamic, hashtag multifaceted. It's true. I think it's important and valuable. And I am, like I said, I'm excited to kind of break this apart. So I love Dilbert. I don't know if any of you guys do. I just was cracking up trying to find, you know, a few little slides, clips to show on leadership. It's a funny tension point, right? Because leadership is one of those things that, you know, we could talk about it conceptually, but really in our gut instinct and in our experience, we recognize great leadership and we recognize poor leadership and we recognize middle of the road leadership. And so what I would like to do is get very honest with ourselves and maybe with others. And I'm going to provide a tool here. There's lots of different tools to kind of investigate honestly about your leadership style. But Crystal, if you're still listening, if you would post this link in the chat, it's from Mind Tools. So it's just a simple 12-question quiz. But I wanted to give you guys the opportunity to take it. And here's what's funny. You can take this quiz, obviously, for yourself. And that's what I would recommend right now, because I'm going to ask you about your answers in a few minutes here. Or you can also use these kinds of tools to assess someone else, right? Because emotional intelligence, and that's a key aspect of leadership, knowing yourself, regulating yourself is very important. But social intelligence is very important too. What are other people doing, right? And what matters to them? So when we talk about what's your style, you know, sometimes our style changes based on our context. But naturally, most of us, I mean, we're born with obviously a personality, but it gets developed too. And so this isn't a question of nature versus nurture. This is an initiative to understand nature and nurture, right? So you could be an incredible technical leader and you love doing the work and you've done excellent work, and so maybe now you're in a position of management and suddenly that's a new challenge, right? Like producing the work and being a technical doer is a very different ball game than managing people and expectations and up and down, especially if you're middle management. Maybe you are an owner of your own company, and so you very much have to be in a role where you are directing and you're visionary. You know, I forget the name of it, but I love Simon Sinek. He was talking about, I remember really interesting when he broke it down, like we have visionary leaders and then we basically have operational leaders, and both are really important. And it was a specific word, integrator leaders. And so, you know, we need both. Are you more of a visionary person or are you more of an integrator? Do you tend to be very big picture? Do you tend to dive into the details and do the day-to-day really well? You know, what's your style? Understanding that and understanding how you interact with others and how you communicate with others, because communication is such a key to leadership, is absolutely essential if you want to thrive. Because my last question here is, what does the success of your project or your mission or your team require of you, right? While this is one of my caveats. While I believe it is good to be true to yourself and authenticity is key to success anywhere, I do not believe that our raw self is always the most appropriate in a highly structured environment. So what do I mean by that? Well, maybe I'm naturally more shy. Maybe I am naturally, it's hard for me to speak up. But if I have solid knowledge and I am in a role where I need to speak up because I know the truth about something, or I know questions need to be asked, I believe there's an obligation to push past my initial personality constraints or bent and to push myself to grow, to speak more, you know, to develop those sort of different skills. Maybe it's the opposite, right? Maybe I have this big bold personality and I can talk to anybody and I'm so comfortable. Maybe I need to learn how to shut up, right? Like, shut up. We all know that person, like, I'm a leader, I'm charismatic. And it's like, no, you need to be quiet because there's a lot of other people with value to offer. And yes, you have value, but please understand that a team is like an orchestra, and an orchestra plays the music that's in front of it. And not everybody plays at the same time all the time, right? There's pauses, there's crescendos, there's different notes, different emphasis to put this together. And so like I said, what's your style? Being aware of how you're behaving, what you're doing is super important. So I'm hoping, Crystal, that you put that in there. It's been like 4 or 5 minutes. Hopefully you guys are just kind of like listening to me in the background, taking this quiz. I think it should be there in the chat. Crystal, I'm not hearing you say that it's not, but if not, maybe you could have seen the mindtools.com/pages/article leadership, and then you're taking it. But just to kind of give an overview while hopefully you're taking it, so I'm looking at the time here. You've got, they break it into 3 buckets. Leadership is usually a little bit more complex than that, but 3 general buckets here. So are you more authoritarian and autocratic? Right? So in this case, authoritarian is often very direct. These are commanding communication styles. This is a great style of leadership for crisis. Get things done quickly. You're not taking polls. This is it's not a democracy, it's a dictatorship approach. And I'm actually working on a project right now where we have to have a bit of that aspect, and we're under the crunch time. So it's really good because one of our chief leaders here is she's a driver, she gets things done, and then she's surrounded by other people who take that message and maybe are a little more democratic in how they extend it out to the next person. But authoritarian autocratic style is great for getting things done in a crisis, but it can lead to team burnout, it can lead to turnover, it can stifle creativity, it can just be too much in a natural day-to-day where there isn't high pressure or it's not a crisis. Democratic or participative is really that middle ground. It's, yes, I make the decisions at the end of the day, but hey, I want to hear what you have to say. Let's get input from everybody. Everybody has a voice at the table. So a lot of times we tend to enjoy this, sort of style because there's both structure, it's in the middle ground. It's both structured, but it's also a little bit more flexible. And so a lot of times this makes a great family to grow up into, actually, as a side note. But in a workplace environment, this can breed creativity, but also a sense of getting things done and ownership. Delegating or laissez-faire, this is, hands off, just like it says. So it's really interesting. This is, it's not just delegating like somebody in an authoritarian role would delegate, like you do this, you do that. It's sort of off-putting the responsibility. So on a spectrum, left to right or top to bottom, you would see authoritarian on one end is being commanding, and then this delegating laissez-faire is like, hey, it's cool, whatever you want, right? And so it might be highly creative. It might be, but sometimes it's just a matter of not owning the responsibility. So I am curious. I'm going to get out of here for just a second and pull over the thing. I'm going to launch a poll question. I want to know, what is your style? If you were not able to take the quiz, that is okay. I think you could probably guess from my explanations, hopefully. But what is your leadership? I'm going to launch this question right now. So it says it's distributing the poll, but I really want to see, where do you land on this? And be honest, because it's not wrong to have a certain style. Like we're naturally maybe bent towards one thing. What this is more about is self-awareness. And then, the next kind of question, I'm going to look at another slide, is what's maybe a good way to approach this? If I'm very democratic, but I'm under a crisis situation, I might have to step up and be more authoritarian. Like that might be the best thing for my team short term. If I am, maybe more laissez-faire, but I need to step it into more, maybe I need to be more democratic. Maybe I need to take it down a notch and I'm authoritarian. It's like, hey, I'm calling for creativity, but I'm stifling everybody. That's not good, right? So I'm seeing the poll. It's good. I see like given another little bit of time, please vote on this. I'm so curious about where you stand on this. If you're able, please vote and let me know. So right now I'm seeing 10% are, so about 10% of us are saying we're autocratic, authoritarian, about a little over 75% are in that democratic, participative, which is great. People probably love to work with you, you know, and about 15% are very laissez-faire. Hey, you just do your thing, I'll do my thing, we'll figure it out. So I'm going to stop the poll now, but that's really interesting that most of you guys kind of gravitate towards the middle ground. And so let's see if I can share it. I think it says hi. I think I'm sharing it right now. I think you guys can see it. I can't quite see what you're seeing, but that's sort of our final score. About half of you guys voted. That's okay, because I know sometimes these webinars are on in the background, but thank you for participating, because it's really, really good to know how we behave and what's sort of the tempo of the audience. So if 68% of you think that you're leaders, you identify that way, and majority of you think you're democratic or participative, it sounds like in general you're probably hitting that sweet spot, right? That is, okay, so I think hopefully I took it out, and let's see, I got a memo. Hopefully, what are you saying, Michael? Sorry, presentation leadership style comes from quiet confidence. I agree with that. Okay, so somebody in the chats wrote that they believe that leadership comes from, there can be a leadership style that comes from quiet confidence. I absolutely believe that. So within the different spectrums of, you know, am I more authoritarian? Am I more this way or that way? There definitely is your own personality that comes into play. Some people have a great quiet confidence. Some people have a bubbly, effervescent aspect to who they are, right? Bringing yourself to the table, but also pushing yourself to develop skills, I think is the sweet spot. You're self-aware, you're aware of others, and you're engaging and you're learning, right? Like, that's probably the most important thing for all of us, is that we're learning and we're growing and we're adapting. So, leadership style and worker motivation experience. I thought this was interesting because this is, to me, was about situational awareness. So kind of looking at, you know, what does the situation require? Not just what am I naturally inclined to do, but what does the situation maybe require of me? It's interesting that, you know, they kind of give you what you should do. So for example, obviously you guys know how to read charts, you're visualizers, you're data people. So, you know, I don't need to explain it, but let's look here and say you're working with a team that is highly motivated and very experienced, then really you're going to take this sort of delegation and overseeing, and to me that's maybe a little bit more laissez-faire. You give them some structure, but because they have experience, because you can trust them, and because they want to get it done, get things done the right way, they are in line with your vision, your values, your mission, then you can sort of maybe pull back a little bit and let them. Now, what if they're very low? It's the opposite end, right? They're low experience, low motivation. So say it's a team of interns or a bunch of noobs, right? But they're also not that motivated. Well, then maybe you need to be more authoritarian. Maybe that's a situation, obviously, where, hey, we got to have structure. I'm going to tell you what to do. We'll go over it and we'll learn from there. And then if you're able to motivate, though, right? If you're able to extract from people and believe in them, and they have some motivation, it's like a little fire, you can fan that flame for them and get it going, then, you know, maybe it switches into that high motivation. Hey, they don't know things well, but they're highly motivated, so now I can coach, right? And at that point, this says avoid condescension. The other one is avoid frustration. So I love this slide. If you guys, I think Crystal shares this with you afterwards if you're interested in this, because it kind of gives you maybe what the blind spot could be too, right? If I have to be authoritarian, what do I need to watch out? I need to watch out that I don't vex and burn out my people, right? If I'm coaching, I need to watch out maybe I'm not barking too much and I'm not coming down at them too much from the top. If they're not motivated, but they're very experienced, I probably need to avoid shaking them. No, we're not allowed to do that at work. But I need to avoid maybe taking over their job and making sure that they stay responsible for their stuff. So really interesting, because leadership is not just about us. It's really about looking outward. So my question to you as a point of self-reflection, and please feel free to write what you think about this, but you know, what's happening with your team and the people you work with? You know, if you're using Power BI a lot, like I said, you're meeting requirements. Maybe you have enough freedom to make the requirements, and you get to decide, hey, this is what the business needs. Maybe you're highly experienced and they're saying, you know, please just show us. In that case, you're definitely leading the team. But also, even if you're working with the business and you're sitting down and you're running through and you're keeping organized, you know, that's something to talk about that's not on this particular chart, is being organized and bringing, you know, great documentation to the table is an excellent way to display leadership, right? Because again, regardless of your title, you're creating structure, you are driving the vision, you are furthering the mission of everybody and the organization by making things very clear. For me personally, this is my background in journalism. I'll say it, I am like a kick butt note taker in meetings. Like, I own that, you know. And now it's funny because I've gotten on different projects and like I become the note taker, because and it actually was a great way to, in the current project I'm on, because when I first came in, it was kind of a little bit of a political situation, and they brought me in and the team on the ground wasn't too happy at first. I mean, we're all getting along great now, but I had to look for ways I could add value, and I didn't have like authority over them, but I realized that by bringing my A game to the table, I could have good influence. So one thing I did, I took great meeting notes, and I was like, this is something I can do, among the other skills, but this is something that I can do. It keeps me engaged in the meeting, I'm staying organized, and the rest of the team is benefiting from that. And so it's to tell you the truth, A, it made me friends. B, it rose, you know, it gave me a little more clout in the group. I had some tangible value to offer them, but that sort of thing is really important. And so I was self-aware in this case. I have these little bubbles up here, right? These are kind of our cones of influence. I was self-aware about what I could contribute, and I was also aware of the group. I was aware of the dynamic. I was aware that maybe if I come in barking, I knew that I could not take an authoritarian style. If I came in barking, it wasn't going to work. I really had to, you know, be very diplomatic and try to add value in other ways. So instead of maybe always communicating verbally, I found ways to communicate, you know, in a written way. So I mean orally, verbally, not, you know, in a writing sort of way. And that helped with my relationship management. What are some of the ways that you know, off the top of your head, this is just a little anecdote, but what are some of the things you're talented at or good at, you know, that you could exhibit leadership by just stepping up and contributing? I think that's something to think about. If you're the person in the room who can always get the presentation equipment working, like, I love you. You're like my favorite person to have around, because I'm like, hold on, which cord, and I can't get it. So, you know, maybe it's something like that. Like, what are your skills and what's needed? Step up. Participate. That's a lot of what influence is just being willing and available and being aware of yourself and other people. So the key takeaway from this, from a high level sort of leadership standpoint, is A, what is your leadership style? Dig into that. Like, I would encourage you, after this presentation, if this sparks you just even a little bit, go take a personality quiz, right? If you've already done that, but you haven't revisited in a while, I am all about that. There's some great ones out there. There's the big 5 traits, right? There's Myers-Briggs. There's all kinds. There's the 4, you know, it's funny here at my current gig, we talk about this. I am in a STEAM environment. So this is know thyself and know others. I am like a lot more creative most of the time than a lot of people around me. And that's not it's not like an arrogance thing to say that. It's self-awareness. The particular project I'm on is all STEM folks. So I've got a bunch of scientists, these people that are experts. I mean, they have their PhDs in, you know, deep science to be able to contribute to the product that this company produces. And then I have a lot of engineers, tons of engineers all around, and engineers are awesome. I love working with people who are highly knowledgeable, very thorough, very detailed, and oftentimes very linear. You know, it's worth asking yourself, what are the roles of the people, not just the personality, but what are the roles of people that I'm talking to? Because a job role will reinforce certain personality traits. You know, maybe some of these engineers outside of work, they get a guitar and they play and they're very creative in other spheres, but when it comes to work, their box is, you know, it's very set, it's very linear, it's very prescribed. And so when I'm dealing with them in a work context, you know, it's not just about their personality, it's about what do they need to accomplish and how can I help them and add value to their mission while accomplishing what I need to accomplish too. So I think that that's really important. I joke about it all the time here because we have a lot of analytical people and a lot of drivers, a lot of people that are wacha, wacha, you know, they're going and they're telling you, and this is how it is, and sometimes they sound a little pessimistic because they're super analytical too, and it's like it's great, because if we are open to working together, I can benefit from them and they can benefit from me. So what I tell them was like, we need to move from a STEM model to a STEAM model. And so science is for, you guys probably know this, but science, technology, engineering, mathematics, right? STEM. Well, there's also in education this concept of STEAM. Right after engineering, you put in an A, and that's the art side of it. And so people like art, like, oh, I'm gonna paint something. No, art is a disciplined way of approaching life. It involves creativity and intuition. And what I would say, and this is what I preach when I'm here, is, you know, we need to master the art of communication, the art of looking at the big picture, right? It's not just what is my job and my role in this silo, it's what's happening, you know, in the big picture. And so one of the things I can contribute with my personality is that A aspect. Now, let's say you are in a field and you're working with marketing people, or you're working with sales people, and these are your people, and it's kind of the opposite. And you're like, I am so much more of just a straight STEM person, right? Like, I like my technology, I thrive in that environment. Maybe you're a hybrid. Whatever it is, I would say look for what other people need to accomplish and look for the gaps and see which ones you can fill, and that is how you will exhibit excellent leadership, and you will have tremendous influence if you stick with that, right? And so how can we grow in this area? Like I said, take an inventory of yourself, of other people. That could just be a quick checklist. That could be like, oh, I know Bob, he likes this and that. But practice that others awareness, that social intelligence. And then figure out where you can have an area of influence. Where are your strengths? Where are the gaps? Sometimes we have challenges because maybe there's a lot of people who are similar to us and we have similar strengths. So what I need to do as a leader is pull back mine and let other people shine, encourage them, you know, give them the attaboy, and then I find another way to fill a gap. That's huge. You add so much value when you're willing to be flexible and think of the greater good. And so some of the skills-based training you can do, obviously you can go online, there's tons of training, you can read books, podcasts. I am a huge fan of like Simon Sinek. I think he's got some great leadership stuff out there. Harvard Business Review has great articles. Attending, you know, trainings that are live or in person, or suggesting to your company if you're at a critical point, hey, can we get some training here? You know, a lot of companies are willing to invest in that because they know that people who are engaged and committed and feel like they have influence are more likely to stay at a job, right? Like that ties to our deeper needs. It's not just paycheck. It's, hey, what I do has meaning and value. So I would say, see if you can get training about this. Find a mentor or be a mentor. For those of you who are you consider yourself a leader already, and you maybe also have that experience, especially with Power BI, oh my gosh, go mentor somebody, connect with another person. It doesn't have to be formal. You can just realize like, hey, I am going to pull this person along. I learned some of these things the hard way, or I spent hours developing this craft. Let me teach you some of the things that I've learned, and find people who are both willing to be a mentee. But then also, you know, it's great if you admire somebody in the workplace to just sort of come under their wing, right? And learn from them. I've had some amazing mentors, and I have been so blessed by that. And people that gave me honest feedback and were like, hey, you know, here's a strength of yours, but here's really where you need to grow. I got coaching actually somewhat recently. Like I invested in some coaching, and I got to work through some of my, this is, you know, I'm being vulnerable right now, but I got to work through some of my, you know, workplace insecurities, where I was like, you know, I'm with all these STEM people and I feel like I'm an oddball, and, you know, how do I bring that to the table? Or, you know, maybe they don't have as, like, I'm more verbal, that's my background. How do I create space for them to feel like they can speak instead of filling the space with myself? You know, or where do I need to be confident that I'm speaking up appropriately? And so I worked with a coach that was like, well, okay, in your mind, you know, frame it this way, try this exercise, write things down. And it really helped me develop that. And I would say all of us always need to work on communication skills, right? So when I say communication skills, yes, speaking and public speaking and great writing, but listening. Like, I have struggled in the past with listening. I actually took a class on it in college, and I found out I had like no empathetic listening, which is terrible. Like, it means basically it was that, you know, the stereotype of like the husband that can't like listen without giving a solution. Like, that's like, you know, the stereotype. But I kind of found myself exhibiting that similar trait of like, so I've really in the last 10 years tried to develop empathy and to be comfortable with listening without offering solutions. I find that sometimes that's just what people need. Sometimes they need solutions, but, you know, understanding what is appropriate is a great way to lead. So there's always that question, are leaders born or are they made? Well, you know what my answer is? I don't know. But I know that if you develop yourself, you will be your best, you will thrive, and you will know what kind of situations you excel in, where you add value, and your work will become more engaging and more meaningful. And that is, to me, is true leadership. We have to lead ourselves before we can lead other people. And so now I'm going to transition to the Power BI stuff a little bit more. Oops. All right, and I want to talk about those leadership things and Power BI, right? I kind of touched on it. Like, if you are between the business and the technology side of the house, you are a leader. You are in a place of influence because you're listening to everybody, and a lot of times you're translating messages, right? It's very possible, I think you've probably experienced this, I know I have, where you're in a project and you're hearing people use words, and they're using the same words, but they mean different things. So as somebody in a role of using Power BI, you can often be in a great position to say, hey, let's clarify what you mean right there. When the business says they want something scalable and sustainable, you know, this, what do you really mean by that, right? Like, what's your, those are nice buzzwords, but what do you mean in practice? And then when the tech side of the house talks and uses those words, they mean, what do you mean in practice when you say that? Or if you guys are defining that differently, you know, maybe we have a challenge here. One of my favorite examples is the word data flow, right? Like, there's ADF data flows, there's Power BI data flows. I have been in at least one conversation where we were spent about 15 minutes talking about data flows, all to realize like we were talking about different data flows. So it sounds small in some ways, but really, you know, from a systems perspective, understanding the systems being technically savvy, understanding what words mean and how they apply, and then what's the impact to the business is huge. We can all grow in that area. The better you understand the business that you're working with, and the better you understand the technology that you're leveraging, the more you are able to integrate systems in a conscientious and value-added kind of way. And that's what I would say, you know, from an information leadership perspective and using Power BI. A lot of times we can prototype work. I have been on multiple projects where we use Power BI to be the tip of the spear and to drive a new initiative and put together a proof of concept, right? And so that proof of concept later on, that modeling, the ETL work, the what questions can we answer with this? I know what the business needs to know, but what have they not thought about? A lot of that type of, you know, forefront thinking has been able to influence major enterprise campaigns that cost a lot more money than what I was working on, but it set a foundation. So I would say know your systems and know them well on the business and the technical side. And then with that, know your people. So from a community standpoint, building those coalitions, advocating for the right thing, making sure that, you know, somebody has the opportunity to speak up at the table, whether that's their personality or not, giving them a voice when they need to be heard. Maybe they're not in the room, but you know it's really important to the business stakeholder that a particular activity or outcome takes place, or we don't neglect something here. And it's your job to speak up for them, and they might not be present, or you might need to encourage them to speak up for themselves, you know. Or from another perspective, I have worked in some really hostile environments, actually, especially in training. I mean, there were times a consultant would be on the ground and the company requested some training, and I certainly would never name names here, but we knew it was a political hotspot. There was a lot of hostility between the IT folks and the business side of the house, and they were vocal and verbal. And so I was warned up front, hey, when these people come, we're actually going to split them into groups when you train them so that they don't overlap too much. But you know, I took it upon myself in that training to be a bridge builder. I knew that there were people who were very hostile to Power BI being added. I knew they had hangups about IT. Sometimes we work on projects where maybe it's not the first time they've done the project. Maybe they've been burned out, and so we need to be a little sensitive because they're tender about it, you know, and rightfully so. And so that comes into that advocacy for somebody's perspective. And the more you show understanding, I believe, in general, the more you can show that understanding and that insight, the more you can build the trust, the greater you have influence, and then your leadership grows, you know. And it's not done in a domineering way, but it is done in a constructive, value-driven, let's get the mission done as a team sort of way. And I think that's the best kind of team to be on. So then, of course, as an individual, I was talking about it, know your stuff, be willing to work with other people, develop your skills, and don't be afraid to fill in the gap and be a leader. You're a leader, I'm telling you. If you're listening to this and you work with Power BI, like on some level, you are a leader. So how does this tie into storytelling? Okay, here's what I would say. It ties in immensely, because actually a lot of the effects of storytelling, and we do this with data, with our information, a lot of the effects in the brain, the activation of dopamine, or what's my other favorite one, serotonin, right? Mirroring neurons, I wrote down spindle cells and intuition. Like, our neurology, our brains are highly designed to be social and to be reactive to stories and visual. We're very visual. Humans are visual. We have this big brain and these big eyes. And so we're highly affected by what we see and how we interact with others. And so if you have Power BI in your hands, like, you have some power there. I don't know if you realize that the potential you have to impact the business and the people around you. Literally, you are activating part of their brains. And so when you can take data and you can make it compelling and interesting, and as you communicate through the reporting, and as you communicate with team members and the business and the tech side of the house, you are lighting people's brains up, and you're being an excellent, you could be an excellent leader and leverage that, right? It's natural for social interactions to spark us. It's natural for storytelling. And think about it, it goes back to the earliest days, like the first human traditions of passing on knowledge. It wasn't written. It was oral storytelling, and now we have, oral storytelling, and we have written, and we have visual, we have these complex tools, but the principles are the same. What it activates in the brain is significant. And so recognize that you have massive influence in a sphere just based on your ability to take information and turn it into something that is palatable, that is intriguing and interesting. And so I've talked about in other presentations, like I said, if you really want to dive into some storytelling tactics with Power BI and do the demo stuff, then I encourage you go check out Pragmatic Works YouTube. There are some great ones, they go in depth, but I just want at a high level talk about how it all comes together, right? So if you bring the business narrative into the visualization and you combine that with reliable data, you are giving the business gold, absolutely giving them gold. And those are the elements of storytelling. So how do you frame your story? Start with the end, right? Where do we need to go? Maybe it's not perfectly clear. Maybe you are in a project with multiple people and it's a little developmental. But still, where does everybody want to be? It's very important that people know where they're going. Yes, there is, you can get in a car and you can just drive aimlessly, that's fine, if you have nothing better to do. But very often, if you have a purpose and a need, obviously you're going to have a path to get there. And so you think, well, I'm out of coffee, I need to go to the grocery store, then obviously that determines my path, right? And my need for coffee. So that sounds, it's a simple, silly example, but for the business, maybe they're tackling financial information. Maybe ultimately they want to get to where they're running complex algorithms on their data and they're looking into influences and things that they can't see because they have mass volumes of data. If that's the goal, how do we get there? That's the question, right? And so particularly when we're talking about storytelling in Power BI and the report, that's kind of a box. So what's our call to action, right? What are we trying to persuade people into something? Are we reinforcing existing values and beliefs? Are we shedding insight to drive operational excellence? What kind of call to action is there from this? We don't just usually produce reports just to sit there statically. If you are doing that and you're not thinking about what behavior it drives and what need it meets, then I would say you might be missing out on an opportunity to be a leader. But what you can do is really engage and hone in on that perspective, right? What actions and behaviors are going to be affected by this? And how does this tie to the mission of the organization? How does it tie to the revenue stream or save them money or whatever it may be? And that's where in your conversations and in your reporting, you will be a shining star. So I would say once you know the end, once you know how it ties to the mission and the action items, then you build it step by step, right? You build that, you take that brick and you build the house and you lead the audience. So it's very important to me. My background is journalism, business journalism. I want to get the story. So I'm working on a project right now, and I need to understand not just what questions need answered, but what order do they need answered in, right? What is the first thing that somebody needs to know? Okay, that's my lead, right? And so if you look at a few of these guidelines here, what I do is, it's the fourth point there, but I start with that lead information. Guess where it goes? Top left corner, because Americans and most of the Western culture, we read things left to right and top to bottom. So in that sense, knowing your culture, you would want to display information in a way that makes sense, right? So not only what questions do you need to answer, but what order do you need to answer that? What's the thing that you need to know first? And then from there, what question gets asked? And from there and from there. And so it is so important in my mind to have a logical progression for the information that you're sharing with people, because that's the story. And let's say you're building the report and you need to speak about it. That's one thing. Maybe you can jump all over. But with Power BI, we really have a great opportunity, with bookmarking and with how you can run through that to not replace a PowerPoint exactly, but to really tell the story. So if I'm building a report for my boss or for somebody else, and I know that their audience, you know, is going to ask a certain question, I need to know what they need to present and how it makes sense and what's logical, right? And I want it to look good. Actually, sometimes I find in the STEM world, like I'll put myself there, even though I'm kind of more the artsy fartsy person, but there can be a tendency to just throw a bunch of stuff on a page and it's like, oh my gosh, you just vomited information. This is not going to appeal to the business. Like, the business wants to see their brand. They want to have clarity. They want it to look professional. They want white space. Geez, you know, make sure that you are either having symmetry or balance. You know, well, something to think about is, you know, from a design perspective, is that odd numbers of things tend to be attractive. So can I play with my layout? Do I want things to be very traditional? Who's my audience here? And then, are they looking on a phone, right? Are they going to be looking on a screen? Is this a group that always prints it out? So I need to think about this from a print perspective too. Maybe what I need to do is change, you know, use one of those layout setting changes and make it something that would print very nicely for them. And they would appreciate that because it's just that kind of audience, right? So really understanding that is so important. Leave white space, please leave white space. I beg you, leave white space. And then something else that as a leader, as an information leader, what I think is so important, we did this in PR all the time when we would test things, test it with the 5-second rule. That's the first thing I put up here on the slide. Test the 5-second rule. So what that means is I have my report sitting up, right? And I grab some and say, hey, Jan's walking by. Say, hey, Jan, come on over here. Can I get you for just 2 seconds? I just want to get a quick test. When you look at this, what do you see? Give it a quick glance. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, quick glance, and then say, okay, stop. You know, what did you learn? What did it tell you? And if somebody cannot give you the basic principles of what you put on there, the basic stuff, you might want to rethink what you're putting on that paper, because your communication might not be as clear as you think. And something we always learned and practiced in journalism is, if you're writing, get an editor, right? Sometimes we get so embedded in our work, and yeah, we have all this information, but it's hard to be distanced enough from what you're producing to have an objective perspective. So it can be very useful to get that second set of eyes. Be okay with the transparency and accountability. I was in a meeting yesterday, and I had like 8 people critically reviewing my report. And I was like, okay, I'm going to embrace this. Instead of, you know, I encouraged it. I was like, tear it apart. What do you see? You know, okay, I'm missing a label here. Oh, this is out of order. Wait a second. This doesn't really make sense. We had it in there, but it doesn't make sense. Hey, I'd switch these 2 around because it doesn't logically flow that well. And so I got really constructive feedback. I was able to better the report, better deliver my product, and also, again, team building and exhibiting leadership. I was collaborating. And so I would encourage you, how can you get other people to participate in your work in a meaningful way? And then, again, fire those brain neurons, get a better product, and drive it out. So one thing I would say is themes. Power BI has really updated and evolved with their themes. So a quick win with the business is get their branding squared away. What are their colors? Marketing or PR department will probably have a list of hex codes for you. If not, take a picture, get a snapshot of their website. I'm going to show you this real quick. Get a snapshot of their website. There's color picker things. Go online, put it on there, and then what you can do is you can go, oh, this is the green that I need. And then it gives you the hex code. You can take that code and you can put it in a notepad and you can build out your own custom theme and line it up with their colors if you can't get that directly from marketing. But what I would say is branding, branding, branding. There's a themes gallery for Power BI that you can go to. Maybe there's a quick win. You don't have to do this all custom, but it does not take that long, and the tool is easier than ever to leverage, right? Go to the data stories gallery for Power BI, look at some awesome examples and see what can be done. And sometimes you can show that to people and say, well, what do you like? You know, go back to the business user. What do you like? What works for you? So I would leverage that. Power BI is visual, tie it to their business. They put a lot of money into the branding. And then I would say use background images to set the stage, right? I go into this in depth. I show how to do it in my other webinars. It is a great trick of the trade to be able to leverage background images and set it up and make your report look totally different. I can show you very quickly. I know we're wrapping up, so thank you guys for being here, but I can show you very quickly an example here where I use background images to build out my report. So if you go back to the first slide or look, you could go visit my little blog, and it looks like, you know, I've got these buttons on here, different things people can click on. I leveraged a background image. Go for it. It's a quick, easy win. Play with it. Once you do it once, you can have a template that you could use from that point on, right? And so I have to wrap it up now. We're at the top of the hour. These are the resources that I used. I did include them in my deck, and I know Crystal will send them out to you guys. Thank you so much for participating, for listening, for taking the quiz. I hope it just gave you a different way to look at your job and to maybe have a fresh flow of energy into it, right? What you can bring to the table. You are a leader, and I am so excited to, you know, hopefully hear from you and find out how you lead and what you believe about leadership. I believe that if you're using Power BI and you're working with the business and you're working with the tech teams, you're a leader, you're in a spot of influence. So leverage that, use it, you know, develop yourself, develop your craft. Thank you. Have a great day. I appreciate you all very much. And I will chat with you soon. So thank you. I'm gonna figure out how to, whoop. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Erin. It looks like you don't have any questions here. So thank you so much. I can give a few minutes, I guess, if anybody has any questions. I don't think that they do.
That works.
Don't think that they do. All right, awesome. I know a couple of you guys are asking about the webinar and the slides. As Erin stated, I will share all the links that she has provided in your email box tomorrow around noon Eastern Standard Time, maybe like 1 p.m. to Eastern Standard Time. So just look out in between that hour for your webinar, for the recording of the webinar. Also, you guys can view the recording of the webinar on our YouTube channel under free training. If you guys have any questions, please do not hesitate to email me or Erin. We'll be happy to help you guys. I think I see working with the group. Okay, I have one question in the chat from Sam, Erin, if you have time really quickly.
Yeah.
He says, working with a group of inexperienced performance analysts who are not analytical and aren't BI savvy, where should they start and where do I start with them?
I love whiteboarding. I don't know how creative you are as a leader, how well you can explain things, but I think that it is, if you're able, well, and we have COVID right now, so it's a little challenging, but if you can get people into the same space, whether that's a digital space or a group, and you're able to, you know, kind of start going through the high level of what is BI, why does it matter, how does this tie to the business or our organization, and you can start spelling out for them a framework of why that matters and why it's important and how valuable they are, and not only that, but how valuable that job skill set is in terms of a career and compensation, then I think you can hook them and find their natural motivation. What I would say is, are they all the same? Are they different? Because if it's possible to do some one-on-one coaching or to chat with them and have a sidebar, that's something that I like to do with people. I will try to get them, know them, what makes them tick, and then connect that to the mission, connect that to the values. That's on the soft skills side. Another way I think to actually work in tandem with that is, like I said, do a whiteboarding session, break it down, and then tie in those technical tools. And if you're able, maybe you send them, you know, food for thought, things that they can read, articles, or you invest in them going to doing a dashboard and a day training, or, you know, if the goal is to boost up their technical skills, then I think you have lots of different training options. But it sounds like they just don't even know what's going on. And I actually experienced this with interns this summer. They are engineers that they have never worked with data and they don't have any business background, but they're doing a KPI reporting project. And so we had a couple of sessions where I was like, what do you know? And they're like, blank, they don't know anything. I said, okay, let's start from the top. So here's why we're doing what we're doing. Ultimately, businesses need to make money and they need to reduce costs, right? So here's how we contribute. Leaders need to answer questions. These questions get answered through insights into their data. Here's how we do it. And I would start breaking down, here's source systems, here's where they land, here's how we model it out, and just try to give them a high level picture. And then here's the value of reporting. Here's ways we want to show it. And I can honestly say these little interns are like flourishing now, like they're growing. So I can relate to, being working with people that have never worked with data or BI, anything like that. But I think it helped me to get to know them. I knew they were engineers, I knew they were analytical, and I knew that if I could explain the value to them and the why, the rest of it would kind of fall into place. And then I led into the how and the what. And so it's iterative, it's step by step, but I would say group sessions and one-on-one conversations are a great way to get that going. So thank you, that's a great question.
Okay, I think that's you got some more coming in here. Let me see. Okay. It says, what do you do? Okay, here's another question. What do you do with a bunch of business analysts and business SMEs who are completely unfamiliar with DAX and have low motivation to learn it? Do you have some practical advice for business learning DAX and resources?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually encountered this quite a bit in my training life, because I would get pulled into groups, go on site to different companies, and a few people really love to learn DAX, and oftentimes it was like bang your head against the wall. They just didn't want to do it or see the value. So kind of again, to piggyback off of what I said in the first question is, can you address the why? Why does this matter? Because motivation is often tied to meaning and purpose, and why. Getting the why for them in place and tying it to what personally they're interested in can be a great way to just enhance the motivation aspect of it. Sometimes motivation, and this is authoritarian, sometimes motivation comes in the form of, this is what's expected. I want you, I want to approach this in a fun way, in a positive way, but please understand that this is directly tied to your job performance, and it matters for your continuing job security if you have the ability to do that. But sometimes we try to stay positive, but sometimes it is a matter of giving a reality check to somebody. This is why you need to do it, And then on the practical side for learning DAX, I would absolutely say, Pragmatic works this sounds like a pitch, but we offer this kind of training. So right now, even with COVID, we've really adapted to doing a lot of online training, and you could do private sessions, you could do public sessions. So I would say training, and find out if they're motivated to do online courses, and they would prefer not to be in a group, not to be led by others. Maybe that's their personality. Give them the training in the format that they like, right? But other people, they really like face-to-face time. It's tough with COVID, but if you can get a trainer in there, if you can, engage them in a way that they enjoy learning as much as possible, then I would say run with that. And there are great resources available. Pragmatic Works has a lot of DAX training. And it's practical, it's down to earth, it can be in person, it can be online, it can be private, public. So, I would say take advantage of that. And then also, of course, online, you can find printouts and you can find different things like that. So there are lots of resources, and I would say tackle it from as many angles as you can feasibly tackle it from, and get their how and their why in place, because once they know why they're doing something or it connects, I think usually from that point on, you have a little more motivation. Try to be positive, but reality check, sometimes it happens. I've had to carry the big stick around lately and be a little authoritarian. So there's a time and place, you try to be nice, but. So that's a great question. I think that's a practical question. We can all kind of struggle with that. How do I better myself? But the resources are definitely there. So I appreciate that question and appreciate that you're leading people. Awesome.
All right. That looks like all the time. I mean, Sam, I do see your last question. Erin, do you want to take it or do you want me to send it to your email?
I can't see it, so I don't know. I'm looking,
the last question he has is, do you know of a good business requirements document or documentation framework for getting business requirements and general requirements for Power BI report?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I have not found a good one that's publicly available online. What I have done personally is make my own templates and reuse them client to client. I don't see one. And in fact, I'm gonna like suggest this as something that maybe Pragmatic Works we can offer, because we have a lot of different awesome consultants who put together, you know, very organized documentation for requirements. Whatever I would say is be consistent, and honestly, it may be worth the time to build out a template, whether you use a Word document with clear headers and you list them out. I am a fan of, you know, I tend to use, it depends. If I'm showing it to the business, I'll often use a Word document, but I put cells in there and I'm like, here, what's the requirement in human language? What's the requirement in mathematical terms? What is if there's further definition of it? And then if I have notes on the DAX or anything like that, I try to put that in there and keep it all straight. Write it down. So like, I wish I could say, here's a template, here's a great, make your own template and write it down, and then reuse that template is what I would say. And I will talk to Pragmatic Works about if we can either make a class or offer that resource. You know, I think it would be valuable. That's a great question. And that's great leadership. Yes.
All right, that looks like the last of them, and since it is 12:11, if you guys have any further questions, like I said, from Erin or myself, please feel free to reach out to us in our email box. Like I said before, you guys will receive the recording of this webinar tomorrow in your email, probably around 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can also go onto our YouTube channel under free training at Pragmatic Works and view all of our free webinars, our free content. If you, like Erin said, if you guys want a more in-depth on the data storytelling side with this, please feel free to look at some of our webinars on that as well. I want to thank you guys so much for joining. Erin, as always, it's been such a pleasure to have you on today. Thank you so much for hosting. We greatly appreciate it.
Hey, appreciate you guys. Have a wonderful day.
All right, everybody, have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday.